Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of my podcast, Grit Stories of Resilience. I have been going to Chetola Resort in Blowing Rock in the fall every year since 2012, except for 2020, which was the COVID year. This last weekend was my 13th time there, holding seminars for lawyers and paralegals all across the state. I like to go there for lots of reasons. It's a wonderful place to have a program. It's a wonderful place to go and see. But also, I'm able to attract people from different cities and locations across the state. This time, we had people from six, I think, perhaps seven different locations all across North Carolina. It was going to be a great weekend. The weather was terrific on the ride up on Thursday. Got there to check in, I guess about 2:30 or 3 o'clock after having had lunch. Walked into the registration desk and feeling pretty confident because I had signed a contract to do these seminars back in the winter of 2025 and had the room reservations booked then as well on the master contract. And so when I walked up, I felt okay. Gave the lady at the front desk my name. And she looked quickly at the computer screen, kept looking back and forth. And there was a pause, and she looked at me and she says, can you respell your name? And I did. And she said, I don't have anything here for you. You don't have my name or anything? She said, no. And we're about full. I've had these sorts of situations before. Maybe you have too. Not in a hotel, but when something happens that you're not expecting and how you respond to it and react to it. It reminds me so much of being in a courtroom in a trial and asking a witness a question and they give an answer that's different from what you may think it's going to be. Or when you're sitting there while the other side is examining the witness and they're killing you with what they're saying. So I remember that the main thing to do is to try very hard not to overreact, just to stay somewhat calm. Perhaps the somewhat is the best word to use because you're not totally calm. Anyway, we went on back and forth, and she was very nice. Her name was Tracy Hudson, and she was trying to make this work. And she said, "I wonder how this could have happened." And I said, "Well, I don't know." And I said, I booked the room. It was on the master contract." And she said, "That may be the problem. It never got transferred to here from there, even though the offices and the computers are in the same location, or generally speaking. It never got transferred from one important place to the other." So she said, "Let me work on this." And she did, and she found a room in the Bob Timberlake Inn for one night. And I was grateful. And she said, I says, she said, "Is there anything else I can do? I don't know if you could stay there tomorrow night, on Friday night, but we'll see. We'll figure out something." This went on for a little bit of time. And then she said, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And I laughed a little bit and I smiled. And I said, "Well, there is one thing." She said, "What's that?" I said, "I know you have some breakfast coupons for breakfast. It allows you to eat breakfast free. Do you have any perhaps that I could have for that?" She said, "How many do you want?" And I told her, she gave them to me. I even went back a second time and asked for a couple more, and she smiled at me and laughed and said, okay, here's two more. And she said, we will work this afternoon and the evening. I get off later on and I won't be here, but my good friend, another person will be here. Her name is Macy. I said, well, I've spoken to Macy on the phone. She's a student in Appalachian State and she will help you. If anybody can figure it out, she can. She'll work on it tonight. Just give us some time to see what we can do. And then taking this all in was the concierge, Zach, who was sitting at a desk nearby, following this all closely and giving moral support. And later on, when I asked him, I had a bottle of wine, and asked him if there were any wine glasses I could borrow, because I hadn't brought any. He said, I'll go get you two. So he goes down somewhere at the bar, I guess, and finds two wine glasses and brings back. That night after dinner, I come back and I still no word on what I'm going to have to move or not. I won't learn until the next morning the answer to that. So I'm sitting in the lobby. Macy comes in about 7 o'clock in the morning and she says, I've got some news for you. And I said, what's that? She said, well, I'm going to have to move you. However, I'm going to put you in room 200. It's on the second floor. It is absolutely one of the three nicest rooms in the hotel. I had no idea what she was talking about, but that was fine. I had a room. Later on that afternoon, I went in and saw what she meant. It was a suite. And she said, I gave it to you the same price. I tell all of this story to you here at the beginning of this podcast because it's an excellent example of making something out of nothing. Of when a disaster strikes, keeping calm, not me, but them, and making something better than it was. So I want to do a shout out to Tracy, to Macy, and to Zach. Three people at this resort. I don't know what they're paying them, but it's not enough. They ought to do more. I could take those three people, put them in any business, anywhere, and it would work. They were that good and pleasant and smiling the whole time. That morning, our program started about 9 o'clock. People came in, had coffee, sat down, got acquainted with each other. Some of them knew the others. I knew them all. And one of them was just talking generally to the some of it. He was telling a story about himself, and it involved some bears, and which I'll talk about here in a few minutes. And they said, we want to hear about the bear story. I said, okay. Well, now I've been doing these seminars for a long time. And so one of my first break the ice type questions is to start off by going around the room, letting everybody introduce themselves, tell where they're from, and ask them how they're doing. Everybody says, great, good, couldn't be better. And then I pause and then I say, okay, let's go around again and let me ask the question, how are you really doing? To my left was a lady named Carmen James. Carmen is a wonderful, wonderful lawyer from North Wilkesboro, or she would say Wilkesboro. She has come to my North Wilkesboro programs for a long time. She used to come to Winston-Salem when I did them there as well. And I said, how are you doing? She said, well, I'm not supposed to be here. I've been sick. I've had cancer 3 separate times. I'm supposed to be dead. They didn't think I would be here. I'm here. So life is good. I'm happy. If you ever hear this story about how to live your life for one day, the day at a time, I lived my life for that day. And you have to smile and admire the grit and persistence of Carmen James. And then I'm skipping over, I'm not going over everyone, but I went to another lady whom I have known absolutely for years. She works in Plymouth, North Carolina, which is a small town on the way to Nag's Head. At least that's how I've known it. She's great. And with her sidekick, Kathy Ainge, there were two of them there. And I was surprised that Lynn was coming because her daughter, her only daughter, is getting married this coming week on Saturday in Lillington. And Lynn is sort of responsible for helping host and put this thing together, and of course paying for it. And she doesn't know yet how much money the tips are going to be. And she said the county paid for their first night there. Second night they were on their own, and the hotel, which was okay but not great, upped the price by $100, making $400 a night as opposed to about $295 or something like that. So she lay awake in bed that night, stressing because she had to have enough $50 bills or $100 bills to put in an envelope for tips for the wedding. Lynn was under stress. Under stress. And then I can always count on my good friend Charles Douglas from Winston-Salem to come up with a story. The last time I asked this question, the last program he was at, he tells the story of getting stabbed in his upper back, by someone in the parking lot of the Thruway Shopping Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He wasn't hurt really badly, just stunned and a lot of blood. But anyway, that was his story the last time. This time, he told a different story. His parents own a home up near Hounds Ears. Nice area, beautiful place, great neighborhood. After the storm, the hurricane last fall, at different times through the years, his parents came, a brother came, and then he and his wife came. The bottom line is the last time they showed up, they went into the refrigerator and it just awful smell. Somebody left the food in there, and the power had gone out because of the storm. So they bagged it all up and tossed it outside, which attracted animals, bears. As he said it, a mama bear and two of her children whom she couldn't get rid of. I said, well, how big was the mama bear? He said, listen, Jim, the mama bear was as high as this door, standing on 2 feet. And the two children weren't much smaller, at least 2/3 of this door in height. They could have hurt you. They could have killed me. What happened? Well, my wife got really mad at me because I left the garage door up, and the bears came in and found trash and garbage in the garage in the bags and went through all of that and made a mess of everything. And then, Jim, they opened the door to my car. They opened the door to my car. They didn't get in the car. I don't know why they didn't get, but they didn't get in the car, and they finally left. So I snuck out in the garage, closed the garage door. We have a dog. The dog needs to go for a walk. We can't go for a walk in the yard. There, the bears are there. So we got in the car, put the garage door up, and snuck out and raced away and closed the garage door. Came back, and the bears were gone from their yard. He'd gone down to some other yards where they had seen the trash gotten into. As a matter of fact, the bears went into a BMW SUV and just trashed the living daylights out of the inside of that car. Charles was under some stress telling about this, which had happened somewhat recently. And then there was a paralegal, also from the Wilkesboro area, who had been really sick in the January, February months of the winter months of this year with kidney stones and trying to pass them. And says as much pain as she'd ever been in her life. And another paralegal from another location, a little bit concerned about her law firm, how she's doing or whatnot, or changes that are coming, but she just feels anxious about it. She didn't say anything about it at all, other than she felt a little anxious. So everyone there settled in with coffee, and then we got on to talking about other issues of what lawyers and paralegals can do in their careers and how they perhaps can do them better. I told the story, as I've told on my podcast previously, about scams and how I got scammed this past March for $2,000, and how I wanted to make that money back because it was gone forever in India somewhere, was to develop and get approved by the North Carolina State Bar program on cybersecurity, because lawyers have to have that requirement now, a technology hour every 2 years. And I wanted to offer one to lawyers, and that would be how I would recover my lost $2,000. And then one of them pipes up and says, "Well, here's the thing, Jim. I have a client, or have someone who had a client who lost, a lady who lost $4 million. $4 million. That's a lot of zeros in a scam, which she cannot recover." You have to be careful today about opening your email, clicking on anything. If you don't know where it is coming from and you're not sure, don't do it. If you see a phone number, rather than call the number that you see, go to the number that you know is legitimate for that place and call that number and ask, is this other number a good number, or is that somebody else posing as them trying to get your money? So we talked most of the morning about that sort of thing and how to start over and how to come back and what is required. I'm somewhat sympathetic to these people who say they're good, doing well and good, and don't tell that they're not doing well until you pursue it a little bit further, because I can still remember the first few visits I went to see Dr. Jean Spalding all those years ago in the 1990s. And it took me so long to be able to be candid and honest with her when she was asking me questions. My favorite story is on time, as she asked me, I remember it so well. She asked me, when was the last time I was carefree and happy? And I wasn't sure that I could answer that question, because I didn't think at that time in my life I was either. I sure as heck wasn't carefree and probably not very happy at that time. And she said, so it took me a long time. It took me 6 or 7 weeks to come up with an answer. Probably cost me a lot of money to go into these sessions and not answering their questions. But finally I did. Told her it had been when I was a junior in college. So I understand that it's tough to be candid in front of other people. It's like going to a group therapy with the Bob Newhart show when he played the psychologist years ago on television. You're being asked to be somewhat honest and say the truth of what's going on in your life. Some do better than others. But even if they don't answer it then, even if you don't answer it then, it makes you think about that sort of thing. And so I think that's probably a good thing. And then we talked about, what's your purpose in life? What are you wanting to do? What do you want to accomplish? If it's perhaps true that you won't be remembered forever because you're not famous, maybe even famous people aren't remembered forever. Who knows? But what is it you want to do? What can you do in your life that makes an impact on other people? I looked at the lawyers. I said, let me ask you this question. If you were 20 years old now, or 22, would you still go to law school? Is that what you would do? Or will you choose some other career? Carmen said, well, Jim, I will tell you this. It's not the same as it used to be. It used to be more profession. Now it's just a way to make money. So it's not as much fun as it used to be, I don't think. But most everybody there said, yeah, they do it again. And I got this sense that that was because of lethargy a little bit. They didn't know quite what else they would choose to do. I have this one friend, Ann Kirby, who is a friend of mine from the eastern part of the state, New Bern, and she did a podcast. She used to be an assistant public defender some time ago. And I asked her that question, would she be a lawyer again? She said, oh, hell no. I wouldn't do it at all. I said, well, what would you be? She said, I would be a weather person. There's no pressure on being a weather person. I just reported I'm not responsible for the weather. She says, I don't like being a defense lawyer in many ways because I don't mind representing people who are guilty. You know, people always ask at cocktail parties and things like this, how can you represent somebody who's guilty? Well, the truth of the matter is, representing someone who's guilty is not that difficult from a moral point of view or emotional point of view. You can do that. You didn't do the crime, and you're just trying to get the best result for them and the rest of their life that you can, but you're not trying to undo what has been done. Many times they plead guilty, for goodness sakes. What's really tough? What is really hard? The better question to ask is, how can you represent someone who is not guilty? Think of that. How can you represent someone who is innocent? If you want to talk about pressure, try representing somebody who's innocent because you know that if you make a mistake, if you screw up in any way, it's on you to some degree. And that's a different thing. That's a little bit of a tougher thing to do. So what is your purpose? Would you be a lawyer again? One of the best answers to that came the following morning at breakfast when I was having breakfast at the Chetola resort, and John Burns, who had been there the day before, he is from Monroe. He was there with his wife, who also doubles as his secretary in his law office. He laughs, and his favorite line is he's the only lawyer he knows who can live and sleep with his secretary, and and his wife doesn't get mad. Anyway, John comes over to the table and says, I thought about that question you asked yesterday, Jim, about would I be a lawyer again? I was trying to answer. And then I finally realized that I met my wife when she was working at the Register of Deeds office more than 38 years ago. And we married and raised 4 children. If I had not been a lawyer, I would never have met her. So yeah, I like being a lawyer. And yeah, I would do it again. Isn't that good? All these people like that. Very human, being honest, doing the best that they can. One of the beauties of these programs is you get to meet and talk to people where they are and ask the questions of how they're doing and bring out things that they never thought they might discuss, certainly not a continuing education program. Nevertheless, I laughed and commented. I said, I have to tell you, I have tried, I've always thought that my programs were successful when I did not talk about the McDonald case. Because, when I waited tables at 42nd Street, the first question anybody ever asked me was, what is the fresh fish of the night? And the second question was always, do you think he did it and why did he kill his family? I can understand he killed his wife, but not the children. They never even said who he was. I was just supposed to know. Of course, I did know. But I had gotten tired of talking about that. until I realized not long ago when I was looking at the numbers for my podcasts that I did one back in February of this year, February the 17th, which is the date of the McDonald murders all that time ago, and realized that the largest number of views and likes and so forth and comments tripled the closest competitor, tripled the closest competitor. And I did almost no marketing for it at all. Just put it out there and sat back and over. It's been 6 or 7 months, but it's still, people still watch it on YouTube. Such is the power of a story like that. So maybe my purpose is to at least talk about it from time to time to people at least of a different age. I want to talk for just a moment about last week's podcast and the West Jefferson Hotel. That is one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done over 2.5 years of doing these. They were great. Lily and her dad, he working on it for 5 or 6 years to restore it, not knowing whether the great final result would be as he wished, he hoped it would be, and how good it was. And one of the people there had seen it, and she said, Jim, the thing I liked about it so much is they got the first telephone back that was ever in that hotel. Someone had returned the telephone to him. I tell you this because people listen to these things and people view these things, and what you say or do on these things can make an impact on people. And I would just say to you that don't lose sight of the fact that you can have such an impact. They showed grit and resilience in working year after year to make that hotel a success. I went back the last time to see Zach at the concierge desk and thanked him again for helping me out on my reservations and getting the room done. He says, well, Jim, he says, when something happens bad here, or something doesn't go as it's supposed to go, doesn't quite work out, we try to make it whole. How did we do with you? How did we do? Because none of this was your fault. And it wasn't any of our fault individually. We weren't the ones that made any mistake. But how we tried to fix it. How did we do? I said, oh, I think you did very well. I think you did very well. These things will happen in your life. You will make a mistake. It's not the mistake that you made that is the most critical piece of the puzzle. It is how you respond to it when it's done and when someone figures it out or you figure it out yourself. That's what makes the difference. That took me a long darn time to come to grips with in my own situation. It really did. But I do think that starting over again requires honesty, a little bit of humility, maybe a lot of humility, persistence, and believe it or not, it requires, I think, somewhat of a sense of humor. In today's world, acceptance of responsibility is not necessarily in fashion as much as it has been in past times, but it still works. Saying you're sorry still works. being nice and kind still works. It worked for Chetola, and it can work for you as well. 2 weeks ago, I was looking forward to a great weekend. I had no idea what would happen, how it would go. I just knew there would be some surprises. This time, the surprises even took my breath away. It's like that scene in the movie Forrest Gump when Tom Hanks, I think he's sitting on the bench, says, "Mama always told me that life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. But what you can do with whatever you get, you make the best of it." Thank you so much for participating, for listening or watching this podcast. I hope to see you again soon. Thanks.